Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Monday, August 12th, 2019. My name is Sam Seder. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America. Downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, journalist Timothy Faust on his book, Health Justice Now, Single Payer and What Comes Next. Also on the program today, Jeffrey Epstein dead. His apparent suicide shrouded in questions and mystery. Also on the program today, Trump administration continues its assault on the administrative state and on immigrants. The administration announces new rules to limit so-called legal immigration. Meanwhile, the Trump administration weakens protections for endangered species. The Trump EPA will not allow Monsanto to put cancer warnings on their labels for Roundup because it's fine.
Free market.
Meanwhile, new information about EPA's supposed scientific reversal, which allowed the Pebble mine to cause, quote, a complete loss of the habitat of the largest U.S. fishery in the country, I guess. Oops.
Is that bad?
Meanwhile, dozens of arrests over the weekend as protests against ICE in New York and D.C., including Jews celebrating Tisha B'Av. A conservative wins the Guatemalan presidency based on a repudiation of the Trump safe third country deal. And good news, that Russian radioactive explosion turns out not to be a missile, just a small nuclear reactor. China claiming the Hong Kong protests are terrorist-y. And sadly, Trump's ritzy Hamptons supporters claim they have to hide in the metaphorical closet. Instant analysis? Good. All this and more on today's program. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show. It is another week in this era of great malaise. Ladies and I'm not going to be. They talked about Jimmy Carter's administration or his era as being one of malaise, and I was, I guess, about 13 or 14 at that time, maybe 12, by the end of the administration. So I don't know that I really was fully conscious of a malaise per se. And maybe malaise is not the word, but severe depression, like emotional, like a malaise,
It kind of implies like an ailment of the privileged to me.
A malaise?
Yeah, like the 90s, everyone's so disaffected, right? They felt malaise because they were like bored.
Well, I'm talking about the Carter era was specifically considered, there was specifically a Carter malaise, and I doubt that was referring to just the elite at that time. But we definitely have a malaise of sorts in this era. And
How many closets does the average Hamptons home have?
I would
hide
say so many that, like, I think hiding in the closet for these Hamptons people, I feel like would be the functional equivalent of like our vacation.
I feel like Malaise has been upgraded to horror for most people these days.
It's possible.
Like, I miss the Malaise.
Right. Malaise is just a lot. I think probably just, you could deal with that.
You know what song was
by
number
drinking.
one during the Malaise speech? Blondie Heart of Glass.
There you go.
Yeah.
It's a good song.
Good song.
Fits the times, too.
There you are. With that said, we'll do our best. Thank you for joining us. Brendan and Michael are not with us today. Brendan will be back tomorrow. I don't know when Michael's gone on the lam, I guess. That's the problem. He feels a little cash in his pocket, and all of a sudden now he's jet setting. I don't know if he's like in the UAE right now, or where is he?
Probably.
It's like Carmen Sandiego.
With your help and your membership at jointhemajorityreport.com, I will follow him around on his private jet. Jointhemajorityreport.com to check it out. Let's go into this sound. As you know, there's a big Iowa was very big. The Iowa County Fair was happening. I am a big goer of county fairs. I go to the Dutchess County Fair. I go to the Columbia County Fair when I can. I've been to others. Those are the ones that I regularly go to. And tons of fun. Funnel cakes, a lot of fried dough type of stuff, rides. Kids like it. I like it too. See a lot of sheep, see a lot of cows, see a lot of horses, pigs. And in Iowa, of course, this is where the politicians go. Not for nothing. On Thursday, this is from Edward Isaac Dovier, I think is how you pronounce his name. He writes for The Atlantic. On Thursday, when he was second candidate to speak at Iowa Fair, this is a tweet, Biden said, "What do you think? Anybody draw a bigger crowd? Don't be a wise guy." And then people who have drawn bigger crowds since then, in rough order, Warren, Sanders, Harris, Booker, with Klobuchar and Gillibrand about even. So
I heard Kamala's middle-class tax cuts aren't the applause line she was hoping them to be.
is that right?
Yeah.
At Iowa? I mean, it's interesting. I don't know what you can gain from that, garner from that. I mean, the reason why there could have been, apparently Cory Booker gets really big crowds, but it's not showing up in the polls. My guess is that the reason why Joe Biden doesn't get big crowds is because you either have no interest in him or you don't want to know why you're voting for him. And you want to go check out your number 2 and 3 possibles. But who knows? We will see in time. But there has been a couple of stories like this where Republicans, because it's just because you have Democratic candidates there, it doesn't mean that obviously there's Republicans there as well, and they still do their straw polls for what it's worth. And I've seen a couple of stories like this where a Republican family says, "I will not vote for Donald Trump." And then a lot of it is, as long as the Democrats just need to give me someone I can vote for. Well, here's an idea. Just don't vote. If you voted for Trump last time, I got a solution for you. You let Democrats do what they want to do. You just don't vote. All right, because you people brought this upon us as a country when you voted for him. And if you don't like him now, here's my suggestion to you. Don't tell Democrats who they should nominate. Just don't vote.
Just go home after work.
Yeah, go home. Take the day off. Or if you really want to complete your civic duty, go in, vote for the most local race you can find, and then just none of the above for the rest.
A lot of people did do that last time around.
They did. They left. Yes, but they a significant number of those, I think, were Democrats too. I'm suggesting Republicans only this time. But here is an interesting exchange on MSNBC where it's consistent with our story of which we will maybe get to some of the quotes of the folks in the Hamptons who which is a ritzy area of Long Island in the summer, who don't have the freedom of speech to say that they like Donald Trump if they want to continue to sell their tchotchkes to people. And so here is this exchange from MSNBC.
In which people get to put in a corn kernel for which candidate they support. I want to let you hear directly from him what he told me.
Pause it. Now this is the way they do their straw poll is actually a corn kernel poll promoting corn. Corn, of course, is heavily subsidized by the U.S. government.
Yeah,
this was a decision.
Corn needs the help.
Right. This was in Iowa, they wanted to push it as much as they can. Corn was subsidized starting in 1972 when the Commerce Secretary had a plan to create more disposable income in the pockets of Americans. And so the idea was subsidize corn, and then we got to put in all our food, and which is why we are unhealthy. But go ahead.
You put in your corn kernel?
Yes.
Who did you put it in for?
Yes. I'm white, old. They call me all kinds of names.
And so
Who do you think I would vote for? Come on. You're smarter
I'll let
than
you
that.
fill in the blank.
Yeah, no, I don't have to fill in the blank. Everybody knows. We're the bad people.
What do they call you?
I'm a racist. I went to school. I shared my dorm with a colored guy. I have nothing against him. I grew up in the East. We grew up with people.
Do you think the president's a racist, though?
No, I don't. I really don't.
When you hear "send them back," when you hear him talk about communities of color, do you see why people do call him a racist?
Yes and no, because some of those people he's talking about have said just as bad things about him that you can't say on TV.
Casey, you've been to many of state fairs, and I know most of the folks there on your panel have as well. And the conversations this year just, frankly, are not the same conversations that I've had in years past. And this goes beyond the speeches on the soapbox of these candidates. This goes to the heart of these conversations with voters. And I got to tell you, these are tough conversations to be had because you're talking to people about divide in friendships, divide in family. You're talking about racism and white supremacy. This is no ordinary conversation taking place.
Yeah, it's great. There's a nice conversation taking place there.
It's awesome.
It doesn't sound like it's a conversation.
I mean, it sounds like that guy is outnumbered at Thanksgiving now.
Yeah, it does. And he's a little bit defensive about it.
It's his grandkids' fault that he's voting for Trump.
That's right.
At least they're getting to him.
I mean, the real question at that time, it seems to me to be asked, is like, why are you voting for Trump? Like, what is it that he feels Trump is doing for him? In terms of, I mean, we know farmers are devastated. Of course, there's a big slush fund. When you think about the millions of dollars that have been paid out to farmers because of Trump's actions, can you imagine, Barack Obama got blamed for a George Bush cell phone program.
Or Solyndra.
Right.
I mean, it's possible that this guy is voting his class interests because he is a business owner and he has money.
I would imagine that if Barack Obama came up and promised the same thing as Donald Trump in terms of his class interest, he still would probably be a little bit a Trump voter. I mean, because look at the way he said, "Who am I voting for? Who am I voting for?" He didn't say like, "Look at me, I drive a Cadillac. What do you think? Who do you think I'm voting for?" I mean, he just told you why he's voting for Donald Trump. Because he's one of the bad guys. Get whitey.
Well, those things aren't mutually exclusive. But it does seem like the racial aggrievement is at the forefront of his mind.
I mean, I don't know.
If I had to say.
Yeah, I think that's be a safe assessment with that guy. It's tough being a white. I mean, he really seems like he's suffering under the weight of his whitehood.
I mean, people don't give that guy credit for having room with a colored man in college.
It's true. He dormed with a colored guy.
I just want to tell him, like, you know who else is old and white and gets called names? Bernie Sanders.
There you go.
Maybe go that way.
Folks, this episode, where is this? Here it is. Sun's out. Oh, I got to do that Sun's out, guns out thing. Forgot about that.
Wear a tank top?
Yeah. That was...
Well, when you put it that way, it doesn't sound half as exciting.
Sun's out, but you're in. Don't get stuck in the office trying to find software, folks. Trade that office time for more beach time and find the right software fast at Capterra.com/majority. Capterra is the leading free online resource to help you find the best software solution for your business. It's got over 950. That's like 100. They got an extra 150,000 reviews from the last time we did this ad, I think. 950,000 reviews of products from real software users. You'll have everything you need to make an informed decision, and you can search more than 700 specific categories of software. It's nuts. Everything from project management to email marketing to yoga studio management. No matter what kind of software your business needs, Capterra makes it easy to discover the right solution fast. Look at this. I like to go through, I've mentioned this 100 times before, but I still love it. I go through these categories. They're alphabetized. This is a totally free service. You just go and you look at software. Now, as far as I know, we don't need any, but there are times I go through this, like lead generation software. Maybe we would need that. Lead management software. We don't need that. Lead nurturing software. Learning experience platform software. Lease accounting software. Lease management software. Legal billing software. Legal calendar software. Library automation software. Live chat software. I wonder if they have, they have so many different mailroom management software, martial arts software, marketplace software. The point is that if you have a business, even if you don't think there's software for this, you should check this out because I have a feeling there might be.
Yeah, if you're not using software, get on it.
Museum software, music school software, network mapping, nutrition analysis software. There's so many different things here. The only problem is that whenever I look at this, it's like I have these moments where I imagine I have a different career. Like I'm working a pawn shop and there's pawn shop software or PDF software. I'm not sure how I do that. Pediatric software. Don't want to deal with kids. Personalization software, pest control software, pet grooming, pet sitting, and pharmacy software. The list goes on and on. Visit Capterra.com/majority for free today and find the tools to make an informed software decision for your business. Capterra.com/majority. That's Capterra. CAPTERRA.com/majority. All right, quick break, and we'll be right back with Timothy Faust. We are back. Sam Seder on the Majority Report on the phone. It is a pleasure to welcome to the program healthcare activist and author, Health Justice Now, Single Payer and What Comes Next, Timothy Faust. Welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
So, Tim, let's do this because I think hopefully by now, much of this audience is largely familiar with the problem of our current healthcare system, and at least in terms of the way they experience it, and largely familiar with the concept of a single payer Medicare for all system. But let's review it briefly before we get into more of this. Like, what are the primary problems with our healthcare system in terms of, like, operationally now? I mean, if people experience it now, like they're out of plan or they're in plan, they've got to submit forms, they got to pay, it's super expensive, it changes all the time. But what is the fundamentals of that problem?
So there are two fundamental problems. One is that if you're an insurance company, it's just not profitable to insure sick people because sick people can be really expensive. And if you cover sick people, or if you give them health care they can afford where they need it, you're going to lose a lot of money. For example, like the general statistic is that half of all medical costs are spent by 5% of the population. For example, a person with hemophilia can cost up to $1 million a year to cover. A complicated pregnancy can cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to cover. And that's because, fundamental truth number two, if you're a provider like a hospital or a corporate pharmaceutical company, close personal friend Martin Shkreli, it's extremely profitable to charge as much as possible to people who are sick to receive care that they need. You've got an inelastic cost. People aren't very cost discriminatory when it's their own health care, and for good reason. So
Right.
you kind of got these two competing forces, and the end result is that insurance companies try to shift more and more of the costs of sick people, poor people, et cetera, onto the federal government, while kind of squeezing the remaining healthy pool for as much money as they can get, which is why your premiums go up, your deductibles go up, and all those kinds of problems people have really felt at the pain people have felt with their insurance plan. Meanwhile, hospitals are also breaking arms and legs to make profit. In the U.S., an MRI scan costs 5 times more than an MRI scan in Australia. Literally the same machine doing the same scan, even within the U.S. I think Sarah Cliff, formerly of Vox, and now of Washington Post, did a report showing that within the D.C. area, MRIs can vary up to 7 times in price, including the same machine at the same hospital, just based on whose insurance company was paying for that. So you've got massive cost discrepancies, no regulatory power, no one, like insurance companies need hospitals way more than hospitals need insurance companies. So they're committing extortion. Insurance companies are rational, profit-seeking actors, so they pass on that extortion onto you, the consumer, and the whole thing's rotten from top to tip.
Now, that figure, and I've heard in the past 20% of the people bear 80% of the cost, but if it's 5% that costs 50% of our healthcare costs, I mean, it seems, I feel like that's like a business I could even run, where it's just like, it's so clear what I need to do is not insure those 5 people. I mean, those 5% of the people. I mean, if I just got to get the other 95%, and then and if I can eliminate the 20%, I could be insuring people if I have the proper information for something that I know they're not going to need. And that is, that to me sounds like a great business, unless you're actually the customer in that instance.
Right. It's very easy to insure sick people who never go to the hospital and never see a doctor.
And, and everything I think we've heard about Wendell Potter, I think most famously left that business and has been beating this drum for quite a while. And to a large extent, I think there was a sense prior to the ACA that we could have had a Medicare buy-in at age 55, largely because the industry understood that their business model could not work. And if they could offload people 10 years younger than they are now and when they are eligible for Medicare, they could offload a significant percentage of people who have more likely to be ill to help their business. So these are the core problems. We have on one hand, let's talk a little bit more about the hospital end of it, okay? Because the insurance end of it seems pretty straightforward. I mean, it is a completely unnecessary player in this mix. On the hospital end, how would we do? Well, all right, I don't want to get ahead of myself here. So talk about what needs to happen to deal with both ends of that problem.
So you pool all the money we currently spend on healthcare we build one universal risk pool administered by a public entity that has a mandate to cover in full all care for all people. You build a single payer. And the single payer can do a lot of things that these fragmented insurers can't do. We know that, and I'm sure your listeners are familiar with how Medicare gets to basically set its prices that it's willing to pay. Now, how it sets those prices is, of course, tainted by groups like the AMA, who have a larger than necessary role in
I'm sorry, Tim,
prices.
you're breaking up.
Medicare gets to
Tim,
say,
you're breaking up a little bit. Tell us again. No, how does Medicare set those prices?
So Medicare gets to say, hey, we're willing to pay $5 for a Band-Aid, $30,000 for a hip replacement. And these prices are wildly, I'm making them up right now,
right?
Probably more like $8,000 for hip replacement. We're willing to pay that. Take it or leave it. And because Medicare covers 44 million people, suddenly the hospitals need Medicare way more than they need your random smaller insurer, and they got to take these prices. So they say, okay, we will accept your billing scheme, and we will incorporate it into our hospital. And then they turn around and bill private insurers at a multiple of that Medicare cost. They'll bill at 3 times Medicare, 5 times Medicare, 7 times Medicare to your Blue Crosses, your Aetnas, your whomever. So Medicare acts as an anchor on prices. What a single payer can do is use that negotiating power, but on behalf of 330 million people instead of 44 million people. So it gets to basically say, okay, in the U.S., a knee replacement is worth $7,000 or whatever. And hospitals can take it or leave it, and they're, generally speaking, all going to take it. All of a sudden, you create negotiating power that drives costs down. And Medicare can also look out to make sure that regional hospitals, smaller hospitals, are getting adequate funding. I believe Jayapal's plan includes a thing like global budgets, in which the Medicare for All says, okay, we're going to spend $3.7 trillion this year or $2.9 trillion this year, and we're going to allocate it to hospitals in these ways to make sure they can keep the lights on. But suddenly you've got monopsony, which is kind of a monopoly in purchasing power. And that lets you do a whole lot more things to affect cost than what we can do right now.
Okay, so we've got this monopsony that the buyer, the consumers of healthcare have as sort of funneled through the single payer system, the Medicare system. And just to be clear, when we hear Medicare for all, these proposals are not really Medicare as we know it now, right? I mean, it's really almost more like Medicaid for all.
Yes, Medicare right now is premiums, it is cost sharing, it has deductibles. If you go to, unless you have supplemental insurance, you go to the hospital under Medicare, you're paying 20% of the bill, which is, of course, unacceptable. Medicare also has Medicare Advantage, which is a private carve-out for privately administered Medicare plans, which is extremely profitable, but not great for people who need medical care. They churn out, I think, at 3 times the rate as they buy into these plans. So no, we're looking for an improved Medicare for all that removes all cost sharing and covers all people, including people who aren't citizens.
Okay, so the what do you do when you have you have this monopsony? What do you do when you have the problem of hospital consolidation? So a monopsony works if you're going in and I, as a buyer, have multiple options as to who I'm going to buy from, right? So Medicare can go into a place like maybe like New York City and say, we're going to give you these rates. If you don't want these rates, we're just going to send all our patients to a different hospital. What if I'm going into something that's more rural? What if one company has bought up all the hospitals? What do we do in that instance of that type of consolidation?
That's a great question, and that's a pretty real concern. I think there are 2 things a single payer can do. One is a single payer can say to that consolidator company, if you treat anybody outside of the Medicare for all, you don't get any Medicare for all money. And kind of leverage the fact that these companies are spread across the entire U.S. To guarantee that if they want to get the money in Philadelphia, they got to play nice in outside Pittsburgh. Secondly, I think a single payer is uniquely poised among all American programs to invest in reopening rural clinics and either administering them directly or which is what I would prefer, or contracting them off, because there are massive provider shortages in rural areas, a lot of which have been spurred on by the lack of Medicaid funds available in those places because of lack of Medicaid expansion. But I think a single payer is forced to consider the question of, okay, do we just open our own clinics to take care of people? And I think that's, to me, a really interesting option.
So wait a second, though. I mean, it seems to me like, okay, so we can leverage it if they are taking they're taking patients in an area where there's more competition. But let's say I'm a hedge funder and I'm like, all I need to do is go in and get buy up all the hospitals within big rural swaths where I am the only place where you can get medical care in these areas. I mean, it seems to me that we're going to need some type of legislation, right? Some type of antitrust legislation that is going to prohibit, because our monopsony does not work if we bump up against a monopoly, or because at that point the single payer is responsible for people who theoretically have a shorter time horizon because they need healthcare immediately or over time. I mean, so there has to be a more robust answer for that, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if you want to stick within the single payer, then I think you got the options that I provided. But I think there is there can be a larger movement to break up these hospital trusts. I think there's a lot of the hospital consolidation has really wreaked havoc in a lot of quarters, even in urban areas. I think Pittsburgh is a great example in how hospital consolidation through UPMC has ruined both healthcare and labor, or really damaged a lot of workers in the Pittsburgh area. I think a larger movement towards breaking up the hospitals, towards breaking up the hospital providers, towards breaking up the financial services firms that see people's well-being as an investment vehicle is essential. I don't think single payer can solve that by itself. There's a lot of things single payer can't do.
Okay.
But I think the movement which demands single payer can also demand antitrust legislation.
All right, fair enough. And so let's talk about the question of private insurance. A lot has been made of this. What is the principle here, or I should say, sort of structurally speaking, what is the problem with private insurance?
It's inefficient and it costs a lot. It costs a lot more to insure somebody privately than it does through a larger risk pool, through a larger single payer, or a thing like Medicare, even Medicaid. And they lose a bunch of money because they want to offload sick people, and it results in worse outcomes. Okay,
no, but what I mean is in the context of we set up a single payer system. Everybody's paying their taxes into this, okay? And employers are paying taxes. Maybe middle-class folks are paying more in taxes. Wealthy people paying, hopefully, much more in taxes. The net to society, as we know, is going to actually be we're going to save money as a society on healthcare, and as individuals, I would imagine the vast majority of us, well over the vast majority of us, are going to be saving money net in terms of what we pay for healthcare over the course of our life versus what we'll pay in taxes. With that, if that is the case, is there a problem if somebody goes out there and says, well, I'm starting a private insurance company, why would we care as long as, or let me put it this way, would we care as long as people have to pay their taxes and they can't opt out of the risk pool? I don't know why somebody would start a private insurance company, but if they did, what difference would it make, or would it?
So ultimately that results in stratified care, which there's a track for the private wealthy who are probably buying the private insurance, and there's a separate track of care offered for people in the public plan. A great example of this is South Africa. South Africa has a kind of two-stream model, in which there is a public plan everyone buys into. But if you've got the money, you pull out and you can buy a private insurance plan. And that gets you private insurance coverage, which is much more expensive at hospitals. But that means maybe you get a private room, or you get VIP treatment, or you get certain kinds of things that you want access to, kind of the luxury model. And the result is that in South Africa, I think it's 16% of the population spends 43% of healthcare costs, and that population is predominantly white and predominantly wealthy. It kind of created actual like medical apartheid in South Africa all over again. Whenever you have a kind of duplicative insurance model, it's going to tilt towards favoring people who have money, who will get.
Tim, I'm sorry, we lost you again. You there? I'm sorry, we lost
Sorry,
you.
yeah.
We lost you right after you said whenever you have a duplicative model.
Yeah, you're gonna have people receiving private luxury care at the expense of the public option in the public model.
How does that come at the expense of the public model? Just because doctors will take themselves out of the public program because there's enough money there in the private one?
Yeah, you create options, you create facilities just for private insurance, because hospitals can bill the private insurers more because they don't have any cost saving powers.
And do you think that we would? I mean, let me put it this way: like from my perspective, I don't see that as we have as much of an opportunity for that type of problem as South Africa does, right? I mean, for some fairly obvious reasons, it seems to me. I mean, in South Africa, you've literally had a dual track society for decades. And in this country, there's certainly been, we already have that sort of high-end wealthy stuff, but there's just not enough of those people. Is there? For them to drain that much resources out of the system?
I mean, I hope not, but I also don't want to find out.
Right. I guess from my perspective, from a political standpoint, I can't help but wonder if that's not a decent trade-off. But why wouldn't it be?
I know we can't. I know we can't legislate away people providing supplemental insurance, right? Like we can't stop insurance companies from existing to sell insurance on top of the single payer. That doesn't duplicate any of the existing single payer insurance coverages. And I think that will probably still exist, and that will go to predominantly wealthy people. I don't quite know what it'll cover, but that will surely exist after a single payer is passed. And that is a thing that I don't love, but don't think we can stop.
Okay. So when we talk about that supplemental insurance, that's if they want private rooms or, I guess cosmetic surgery or, something like along those lines. Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah, things not covered by the single payer.
And so...
Because both Jayapal and Bernie's bills include a provision that... No provider can provide care to a person not covered under a single payer that is covered under a single payer.
Okay, I see what you're saying. So if I'm going in and I'm getting any number of any type of treatments, if I'm going in to check and see if I have a heart attack, I can't have a private insurance that will cover that because it's going to be covered under Medicare.
Right.
Okay. And how localized will these programs be? In other words, it's one thing to sort of say that Medicare sets the rates, or how will this money be distributed? What would be the mechanism here?
Well, I can tell you what I want. There hasn't been a whole lot of in the Jayapal and Sanders bills. There hasn't been a whole lot of here's actually how we pass up the money, but I can tell you what they indicate and what I think is totally essential to having a good single payer program, which is you want the money allocated as close to the ground as possible. Simply because healthcare needs are very different from place to place. Healthcare needs in Manhattan and Brooklyn are different. Healthcare needs in Brooklyn and Birmingham are different. Healthcare needs in Birmingham and Boise and Dallas and Las Vegas are all very different from each other. So you want to have a healthcare model which determines how to spend money and where to spend money and what programs to fund that is as close to the ground as you can get, which is kind of a model off the Medicaid program and some of the individual Medicaid grants that have been investigated or explored over the past decade. You want to set a standard for these things are covered that is set at the federal level, and make sure all the financing is federal, because if financing is local, you run into problems. Even a little bit of a cost borne by the state becomes a great way to begin excluding care. But I think you want to let regional organizations determine how you invest money in local ways, whether it's approving new programs for housing or for food, experimental programs for coordinating care, or hiring social workers to work on pregnant people, or applying for new money to try new kinds of programs that can then be shared across the rest of the country. I believe Jayapal's plan does include a local component. It includes local assemblies and local councils, although they don't really define what local means. It could be state by state. It could be even smaller than that.
Let's talk a little bit about long-term care, because as it stands now, I don't think most people know this, but like my understanding is two-thirds of people who are in nursing homes are there via Medicaid. And it varies state to state, but the rules for Medicaid eligibility for elderly people are really draconian in a way.
Absolutely.
I mean, you need to be down to your last $2,000 in assets. You get to keep a car, but if you have a home, that cuts against it. I mean, it depends, I think, state to state. Am I right?
Yes. In some states, I think in most states, Medicaid can put a lien on your house so long as you're in long-term care if you're in it for over 9 months, I believe.
And then what it does is it basically says you got to sell your house, you got to pay us off this amount. I think it's something like $11,000 a month. And so basically you have to spend down all your money before, and in some states, I think, like, even if you give, let's say, $5,000 to your kids or something like that, at that point, the state claws that back if you have given it within the 5 years prior to going into a nursing home, is my understanding.
That wouldn't surprise me. I mean, I've met folks who had to get divorced and able to afford long-term care. And because this affects people with disabilities as well, who need long-term care for most of their lives. And it's absolutely barbaric. The ways part of that is because Medicaid is sponsored by the state. The states are very cost sensitive. They don't have a lot of money, relatively speaking, compared to the federal government. And so they try to find ways to determine, like, who's really worth spending money on. It's means testing. It's means testing weaponized to really affect the most vulnerable people in America. And long-term care is health care. Long-term care must be paid for at the federal level, no questions asked. Because we know what's better and cheaper, which is often, for a lot of folks, home health care.
Right.
People can receive the same standard of care in their homes. It's more humane. Home is where your dog lives. Home is where your family can visit you. But instead, we force them into nursing homes. Now, a lot of that is because of corruption. In Arkansas, I believe, a state rep was found to be on the payroll of a nursing home. And surprise, surprise, he pushed for a nursing home-friendly Medicaid legislation. You see that also in Iowa.
I want to just be explicit about this. So there's two options, right, that people have when they get older. One is they can get a visiting nurse who will come, X amount of hours per day, X amount of days per week to make sure that people are eating or they're taking their medication, or that, check their vitals to see how they're doing. Or if you're concerned about your parents and that maybe they're not eating, or maybe they're not taking their medication, or they're deteriorating because of these things, you put them into a nursing home. Nursing home is obviously far more profitable for somebody than than home care. And so the money basically steps back and says, we're going to manipulate the system so that the system does not pay for home care, because we're injecting our profit motive into the public goods system, essentially.
Yes. In fact, home care often has to be, you could say, opted into by a state. The default model is nursing homes or SNFs, which is bad. It's awful. Home health is a form of agency. It's a form of independent living. And that we deny it to people who are old and people with disabilities is really shameful. I met people in, I forget where, Tennessee, who had to move to Colorado because Colorado has home health for people on Medicaid, whereas Tennessee doesn't. So people had to leave their families and friends and loved ones behind just to go get a chance to live a life that was fair and just to them. And so, like, we understand that home health is a cheaper, better option. It's more humane. It's more cost efficient. We also severely underpay home health aides in the U.S., but paying them $15 an hour instead of $11 an hour isn't going to break the bank relative to nursing homes. But we refuse to do it. A single payer, right now, both the Jayapal and finally the Sanders plans, as of April, have agreed that long-term care is part of the single payer plan and must be covered in full for all people who need it.
All right, so let me ask you this: who takes the hit? I mean, let's go. Somebody's going to nursing homes will take a bit of a hit in this instance, where we rationally give care as opposed to based upon who has the largest profit motive and the ability to lobby the hardest to get that money redistributed to them. But who else in this context? I mean, let's go through some of the different people. Like, one of the things that we hear often is you can't get rid of the private insurance industry because you'll be kicking anywhere from 500,000 to 1 million people out of their jobs. What do you say to that critique?
Well, that estimate of 500,000 people is wildly inflated. To 1 million people is wildly inflated. There's a lot of conflation of healthcare staff with insurance staff. But I've got a couple of things on that. One is that a lot of the jobs people do in insurance will still be needed under a single payer. A lot of the infrastructure of how do you put together a claims pipeline or how do you talk to a hospital still exists. But secondly, I think there's a lot of chances for the single payer to create jobs. The single payer has to create jobs. We have not created nearly enough jobs that we need to actually take care of people long term. And most of the folks who work in insurance probably work in a call center or work as a nurse, chasing down hospitals, talking to hospitals. Actually, I've got an example of a kind of labor that single payer is poised to create. That's an example of kinds of jobs available to people to transfer to from insurance. It's the idea of the medical legal partnership. Medical legal partnership is a Medicaid clinic. There's a bunch of them in the U.S. I know of one of them in Boston that I visited a couple times, in which a social worker helps people both get medical and legal care. If somebody comes in and their kid has asthma, social worker does an intake and says, okay, yeah, this kid has asthma, let's get this person medical care. But at the same time, the social worker recognizes that asthma in kids is often caused by home conditions. The social worker says, for example, what's your home like? Is there mold? Is there water in the walls? What's going on? Yes, it does. Okay, let's bring you down to a lawyer. Here's all the information for the lawyer, because you and I have a lot of civic protections against the things that make us sick, but you only have access to those if you have representation or if you have the time and fluency to do it yourself. The social worker coordinates that care. The person gets a letter threatening to sue the landlord once the home's run up to back to code, and it is, and the person gets better care. This kind of social worker has a valuable function, which is to find people all the care they are entitled to. And if right now, if you work in insurance, your job is primarily to find people the minimum amount of care you're required to give them, right? How do we kind of whittle down the hospitals, the providers, the treatment that we can give this person? A single payer is finally incentivized to invest in this like more empathetic model of health, in which social workers find more people, more care for more people. And these kinds of jobs must be created across the spectrum, whether it's patient advocates in hospitals, social workers who run essential programs, and that's a natural fit for one or the other. And the Sanders plan and the Jayapal plan both include, I think, $5 billion in job training and job replacement for people in the insurance industry. But there's going to be a lot of folks who need to stay in to keep the lights on. Either we nationalize healthcare, we got to build our own infrastructure, and then other folks, there's a lot of jobs just begging to be filled in a more just healthcare model. I
don't know, but it strikes me as one of the greatest gifts we could give to someone who's been working at an insurance company whose job it is to deny claims, to give them the opportunity to basically go and help patients rather than curtail their ability to access healthcare. I'm just guessing off the top of my head that would be a massive benefit to those folks. All right, well, let's talk about doctors, because if we have a monopsony and it functions properly, maybe we've got to kneecap the hospitals a little bit. Obviously, hospitals are going to be losers. But when we say hospitals are losers, we're talking about shareholders in hospitals who are taking a hit, not anybody who's necessarily working there. But I would imagine too, we're going to be hurting, at least in terms of financial. Like some of the people who are doctors are going to lose, right? They're just not going to be. We're not going to have millionaire doctors.
Well, I think doctors come into two very broadly lumped categories. You've got your primary care doctors and you've got your specialists. And specialists are the ones that make the most money. And there's, of course, there's a gradation there, even among specialists. You've got some that make millions and some that make only, $400,000, $500,000 a year. Woe upon them. I think right now, specialists have really tilted the game in their favor. Right now, the board, which helps Medicare set its prices, has, for example, one primary care provider and 5 different kinds of hand surgeons to represent the breadth of hand surgery. And so as a result, it tends to tilt reimbursement models in favor of specialists. And so I think maybe, some of these hyper wealthy, hyper specialists might see a hit in their reimbursement rates. But I think we will see a revaluation of primary care, because really primary care is the thing that drives long-term health. I don't just mean preventive care in the sense of you take care of people now and they'll be healthier in the future. I mean the kind, empathetic work of providing people health care as close to the person as possible is what actually makes a difference in people's long-term health outcomes. And right now, primary care has been utterly devalued. I think there's a parallel fight, not kind of like the one for antitrust legislation that we got to pursue along with a single payer, and that's free medical training for doctors, nurses, home health aides, et cetera. Because right now, you go to med school, you come out with $300,000 in debt, and you look at your job prospects, and it becomes way more tempting to go into being a cardiologist or a hand surgeon or whatever, where you can pay off your student loans, than it is to become a primary care provider or a rural healthcare provider, right? I'm meeting doctors in rural areas who can't afford to retire because nobody can afford to replace them, because it doesn't pay any money to go be a doctor outside Lexington, Kentucky, for example. And so I think if we really want to kind of seed the earth with doctors and make sure those doctors are reimbursed fairly, we got to also fight for free medical training.
And that's not involved in anybody's plan right now, is there?
No, it is not. But I think it's the kind of thing that's got to be addressed.
And so if I heard you correctly, there's going to be some specialists are going to get paid less, and some primary care physicians are going to get paid more. On balance, though, there has to be less, right? I mean, if we're gonna take, I guess maybe 15 cents of the dollar out of the equation in terms of it being single payer and there not being a profit motive, probably a little bit more in that context. And we're going to probably pick up some money in terms of just general efficiencies, but there's got to be some money that comes out of the pockets of doctors too, right?
I don't know. There's a lot of bloat and a lot of fraud in hospitals and healthcare corporations. I mean, just the fact that there are skyscrapers of billing departments in cities across the U.S., like in Connecticut, kind of indicates where a lot of that money is going. Certainly, there needs to be a course correction in some doctor salaries, but I don't think it's going to be quite as catastrophic as some might fear.
Okay,
I could be wrong, but I think the scale of the grift in corporate healthcare is staggering.
I think that's the important thing to keep in mind here. It is stunning. Lastly, let's just talk about what you argue single payer will lead to, because it's interesting. Once the U.S. government, once we as a society have and this is where almost the skin of the game sort of equation is turned on its head. Once it's really society, we clearly, the cost of keeping people healthy becomes clear to society. That's going to incentivize society getting involved in a lot of things that drive health outcomes.
Absolutely. If your people get sick because they don't have safe housing, or they don't have any housing at all, or their housing is flammable or full of mold, and so they die or they get very, very sick with long-term conditions, then all of a sudden healthcare spending becomes housing spending, and you build long-term social housing to bring healthcare costs down. If people get sick because they don't have access to healthy food to eat, so they get diabetes or comorbidities like cardiac failure, then food is healthcare. And you got to invest in food, safe, affordable, free food options to bring healthcare costs down. Right now, nobody is accountable for all the kinds of, we call them social determinants of care.
Oh, we lost you for a second. You there?
Understand that healthcare happens. Sorry.
Go ahead. Nobody. You said nobody's responsible for the. What did you call it? Socially determinate what?
Social determinants of health.
Okay.
Is the medical policy lingo form. But we understand most healthcare happens outside the hospital. It's where you live. It's what you eat. It's are you safe? It's do you have money? It's do you have community? These are the things that really drive people's long-term health. But right now, nobody's profiting off of them, so nobody invests in them, so people get sick and die. My belief is that once we force the single payer to bear the costs of providing care and bear the costs of what happened when care is not provided, it can finally be incentivized and forced to reckon with all these kinds of long-term suffering and long-term health conditions.
Once we basically say that society is responsible, at least for making sure that everybody's healthy, there's like a cascading effect. One hopes, anyways. Let me ask you just one last question, just basically because of what's in the news today. The administration has basically set up a new set of rules to assess whether an immigrant can get a green card or should be eligible for citizenship, et cetera, if you have used Medicaid in the past that can hurt your eligibility for citizenship or a green card. Apparently, it's my understanding. I mean, it was just announced this morning. But what happens if I'm living in this country, I'm undocumented, maybe my family are all U.S. citizens, but I'm the dad, I came in late, or I'm the mom, I came in late, or I'm a child and I came in late, and I don't use Medicaid. What happens when I get sick? Do I just stay in my house and die? What happens in terms of what does society pay for?
Right now, or?
Let's just assume I decided not to use Medicaid.
Right now, if somebody gets sick, they go out and they try to do their best while they're sick out in the world. Maybe they get other people sick. And they suffer. They get long-term conditions that drive them into further long-term conditions. There's a lot of spending. There's a lot of debt. There's a lot of pain. Denying people health care when they need it, creating this kinds of means testing kind of harkens back to American healthcare when it was racially segregated, and it was rationed by race. We're kind of bringing that back and doing that again. No, it's utterly barbaric and fundamentally inhumane to deny people health care they need.
And ultimately, society will end up paying the cost in some fashion, won't it?
Yeah, totally. A person being sick has a long-term cost. Also, there's the pragmatic view, which I find a little gross, which is that the labor of undocumented people is already being exploited and therefore subsidizing much of the wealth of this country, and you're letting your own workforce get sick. But I prefer the more, I think, humanistic argument.
Were it so that everyone in this country did.
Yeah, me too.
Tim Faust, the book is Health Justice Now, Single Payer, and What Comes Next. Thanks so much for all of your information and the work that you're doing. Really appreciate it.
Thank y'all for having me. Really appreciate it.
All right, we're going to put a link to this book on majority.fm, Health Justice Now, Single Payer, and What Comes Next. You can hear Tim Faust a lot of times. He's on Chapo. And he's going around the country. I think he's still barnstorming, basically, a lot of DSA events.
I saw him at one last year in Williamsburg, actually.
In Greenpoint.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I helped put that thing together, actually, and Tim came and spoke at it, and it was very nice.
Well, look at that. You two should meet each other.
Me and who?
You and Jamie.
Oh, hi, Jamie.
There you go. What a coincidence. Yeah, good stuff. And I think I don't know if you can find, but I'm sure DSA has a breakdown of where he's giving his talks and whatnot, right?
Oh, yeah. He's also got some really cool T-shirts for sale that he sells. I'm a fan
Like
of...
healthcare T-shirts?
Yeah, they're like heavy metal T-shirts about healthcare.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, I like the one that says abortion is healthcare. I might get one of those.
That does sound like a good one. Folks, sun's out, but you're in. Don't get stuck in the office trying to find software. Trade that office time for more beach time using Capterra, the leading free online resource to help you find the best software solution for your business. With over 950,000 reviews of products from real software users in more than 700 specific categories of software, you'll have everything you need to make an informed decision. Visit capterra.com/majority for free today. Find the tools to make an informed software decision for your business. Capterra.com/majority. Capterra, that's CAPTERRA.com/majority. Just a reminder, this program exists because of your support. You can become a member at jointhemajority.report.com. When you do, you get extra content nearly every single day of the year. I mean, business days. We take a couple of days off from that, but literally a couple. And you also are supporting the free show. And, every now and then, like maybe once every, 24 to 36 months, we give a super bonus to members. I don't know what that would be, but we're going to try and we're rolling out all sorts of new things. I think we're going to give like member benefits on the calls, like the member line or something like that. We're still working on the technology to do something like that. But nevertheless, become a member today. Join themajorityreport.com. Also, check out the AM Quickie. People are loving it.
I listened to it on the way into work this morning.
Did you?
Yeah, to catch up because I did not follow the news really at all once Epstein died.
There you go. That's exactly why I wanted to do this. And when we're on vacation at the end of the month, we have all new interviews, but we won't have the news of the day. And we will have the AM Quickie. Yeah. So maybe what we'll do, we'll put maybe one on the Monday show. Or no, it'll be in the feed. We'll when we do the intros for that, we'll remind people to go check it out. Let's remember to do that. AM Quickie, it's available in your feed. Come September, we're going to go off on its own separate feed. And we're trying to figure out whether or not we'll do that. Probably even for members, because this is a new product. And we're going to roll it out and put it on its own feed. So check that out, the AM Quickie. And also, justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Use the coupon code majority, get 10% off. Supposedly, Michael will be back tomorrow from his global jaunt in time for TMBS. But we'll see. We'll see tomorrow. Jamie, you're here. The Antifada.
Here I am. So this week on the Antifada, we have Simone Norman, who you may know from the hilarious Praxis video that was going around. We're recording tonight, actually. We're going to have a little girls chat. We're going to talk about irony, humor, and its role in the left and the role that it should not play in the left. So I'm excited about that. Also, from last week, we have a brand new episode of Vampire Castle, wherein I talk with Leslie Lee III from Struggle Session about actual vampires. And this one, we talked about the very funny TV show, What We Do in the Shadows. Also, still good from last week, Sean and Andy talk about the Manson murders and lay out a very convincing parapolitical case for the government's involvement in said murders.
So to cover for Michael, tomorrow night, it looks like we'll have Elaine Yu of Agence France Presse, AFP. Was that good French pronunciation? I went for it there. And she's going to be talking about what's going on in Hong Kong, which looks crazy right now.
I saw a tweet from, I'm going to butcher her name, Zainab Tufekci.
Zainab Tufekci,
yes.
yeah.
And she's there. And she said the airport does not, it does not feel like all of Hong Kong is nuts right now. Like
It's
we're
just the
seeing
airport?
footage. She's at the airport. I don't know. It's worth checking that out. But nevertheless, I mean, that's the way it is. I mean, you have functioning societies in the middle of civil wars.
I saw a bunch of trucks. There's a video out, maybe we played in the fun half of just a line of cargo trucks like getting into formation as if they're gonna try to like start clearing people out of the airport. Maybe.
Jesus.
Damn.
But go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, and Patreon members of Literary Hangover will have gotten George Orwell's essay "A Hanging." We listened to the full thing and talked about it, and spilled the tea on his dad, who was an imperial policeman in the British Raj, specifically the opium department,
Whoa,
which is
things starting to come into clarity now. Now I understand what's going on.
Yeah, well, it's like those very hands-on. Those policemen were like, got to make sure the grow operation's going well, and that accounted for 1/6 of the Britain's revenue from India, selling opium to Chinese addicts, basically.
Jesus,
so we get into that.
All right. Gonna take a quick break, head into the fun half, and see you there. Left is best. Jamie and I may have a disagreement.
Yeah, you can't just say whatever you want about people just because you're rich.
I have an absolute right to mock them on YouTube.
He's up there buggy whipping like he's the boss.
I am not your employer.
You know, I'm tired of the negativity.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to upset you. You're nervous, you're a little bit upset, you're riled up.
Yeah, maybe you should rethink your defense of that, you fucking idiots.
We're just going to get rid of you.
All right.
But dude, you want to smoke this joint?
Yes.
Do you feel like you are a dinosaur?
Some good shit.
Exactly. I'm happy now.
It's a win-win.
It's a win-win-win.
Oh, hell yeah.
Now listen to me. 2, 3, 4, 5 times. 847-906-501-457-238. 56, 27, 1/2, 5 eighths, 3.9 billion.
Wow.
He's the ultimate math nerd.
Don't you see?
Why don't you get a real job instead of spewing vitriol and hatred, you left-wing Limbaugh?
Everybody's taking their dumb juice today.
Come on, Sammy.
Dance, dance, dance.
Rand Paul.
I had my first post-coital scene with a woman. I'm hoping to add more moves to my repertoire. All I have is the dip and the swirl.
Fine, we can double dip.
Yes, this is a perfect moment.
No.
Wait, what?
You make under $1 million a year. You're scum. You're nothing.
Excuse me? Fuck you, you fucking liberal elite. I think you belong in jail.
Thank you for saying that, Sam. You're a horrible, despicable person.
All right, gonna take a quick break. I want to take a moment to talk to some of the libertarians out there. Take whatever vehicle you want to drive to the library. What you're talking about is jibber jabber.
Classic. I'm feeling more chill already.
Good. Donald Trump can kiss all of our asses.
Hey Sam, hey Andy, you guys ready to do some evil?
Hitler was such an idiot.
That guy might be a Nazi.
Agreed.
No.
Death to America.
You.
Yes.
Wow.
Wow, that's weird. No way! Unbelievable. This guy's got a really good hook. Throw our hands up. Wow.
But Sam, I gotta get off.
No worries. Let's. I want to just flesh this out a little bit. I mean, look, it's a free speech issue. If you don't like me,
Hey, shut up.
Thank you for calling into the Majority Report. Sam will be with you shortly.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, it is the famed fun half of the Majority Report. The famous, always famous. Let's go right to the IMs. Colin from Nebraska. Love Tim Faust. Last week I tried to see my congressman, but the town hall was at capacity. Ended up talking to a Trump supporter who has 4 kids, is a plumber with some health problems, but has no insurance. He told me if the government gets involved, you don't know how far they will go. I responded, God bless you. I responded that we know how far the private insurance has gone, and he had no response. Don't know if that's the best way to respond, but we know the horrors of dealing with private insurance companies. There has been a multi-decade, well, maybe more. I mean, in some ways, like the suspicion of the federal government goes back to, well, I mean, to a certain extent to the founding fathers, but it mutated, I think, in the run up to the Civil War, right? And it's that. It is that that remains, like this notion of the federal government's going to come in militarily and take away your property.
Remember that guest we had that made the distinction as like an academic older woman? She, I don't know, I can't remember, but basically said that I forgot what I was going to say. Oh yes, no, here it is. I got it back. Private government versus like actual government, right? Like you can be governed by corporations. You'd never make the like people like in America we're always like we're just governed by our government, the federal government and like local police, but we're governed by corporations to a much greater and more harmful extent, I think.
I mean,
well, one of the dirty tricks of capitalism was separating the political and the economic, or pretending to separate the political and the economic, when in fact the economic is political and dominates most people's lives the most.
Yeah, I mean, there is so much of our economics are just a function of decisions that are made that are, and the question then becomes who's made these decisions and why, and
what recourse do you have to those decisions?
Exactly, and they've just done such a good job in making people fear. Like, I don't know what, I'm trying to think of like what comes after well, I mean, to be fair, Tim Faust has some ideas about what comes after single payer healthcare. Improved housing, improved food, et cetera, et cetera. Now,
it's hard to be healthy when you don't have a place to live.
Well, I mean, the idea being that you're incentivized as society because you're paying for it now. But the fact is, we're paying for it now. It's just that it is so disaggregated that we don't realize that we're paying for it. We're paying for it in higher premiums. We're paying for it in higher copays. We're paying for it in higher taxes. We're paying it in all different directions.
We're paying for it with our lives.
In all different directions. But by paying for, 35 cents here and 35 cents there and 35 cents there, it seems like we're paying less than if we were to pay 50 cents in taxes. But I don't know. You can convince a couple of those people, but I think the key is just to sort of beat them. Bronze Plan. Well, were the environmental provisions of the TPP intended to be enforceable statutes in themselves, or are they simply a requirement that member countries need to adopt in their own local legislation in order to join the deal in the first place? I don't know. Water boat from Kashmir. It's been a while since I looked at TPP, to be honest with you. Water boat from Kashmir. I'm not sure I can do all of this, but the UN Secretary General says the history of Indian abuse in Kashmir is troubling, that he hopes it won't happen this time. I mean, seriously. Sure, it won't happen this time when there is near information blackout, complete with impunity declared intentions. After WikiLeaks detailed what we knew about torture and systemic rape by India in Kashmir, multiple UN reports detailed abuse after multiple human rights organizations, including those from within India, described systemic rape and torture and murder. The world hopes it doesn't happen with fascists at the helm. The Pony Express age from news from Kashmir. All political leaders arrested, regardless of party affiliation. Political civil society leaders are missing or arrested. I've seen some footage of protests when there were supposedly none. I mean, I think there's horrible things going on there, and I don't know. Pakistan moving heavy artillery to the ceasefire line as of 36 hours ago. Eesh. Disco Stew, one thing should be talking about is how to avoid it happening in 2020. Who is going to be the Jill Stein of 2020? Her totals cover the gap in swing states. I mean, look, her totals covered the gap in swing states. That's true, technically speaking, but that does not necessarily mean that all those people would have voted for a Democrat in the absence of Jill Stein. I definitely think some would have. And to be honest with you, frankly, I'm less concerned about well, let me put it this way. I find it less problematic people voting for Jill Stein than advocating a vote for Jill Stein. Because
we don't blame the voters here.
Well, I sort of blame the voters, but I don't blame necessarily Jill Stein voters. I mean, I blame all voters, but equally. But my point being that the real problem is the selling of Jill Stein as an actual solution and depressing the turnout for Clinton, specifically in 2016. I mean, voting is not, you can do whatever you want with your vote. You can go in, you could shut the curtain, you could take a poop on the ballot. In fact, then you could rub the feces all over your body. I mean, you can do whatever you want. But the fact of the matter is that a vote is worthless except as a tool to get to, in some way, tiny, as thin as your ballot, in fact, influence the American political system. To vote for Jill Stein, I mean, you could do it in a state where it's not contested, completely meaningless act. To vote for her in a contested state is not a meaningless act. You are making a decision that you're going to empower possibly someone who's worse, who's the worst of the two candidates. That's it. There is no such thing as expressing yourself through the vote. That is the dumbest, most naive, I don't even think naive is the word, ignorant thing that you could believe that your vote does.
Fantastical.
Well, here's an idea. Everyone who's concerned about the dumb left voting for Jill Stein in a swing state, right? We're always saying we need to be practical. We need to be practical. I guarantee you, if Bernie Sanders is the nominee, that fewer people will vote for Jill Stein in those swing states. And you're not going to convince the dumb left not to vote for Jill Stein if Hillary's the nominee. Well,
I'll tell you what you can do.
And do everything you can to make sure that Bernie's the nominee.
Well, you can do, I'll tell you what you can do. You can say that people who are telling you to go vote for Jill Stein are dum-dums and that you are wasting your vote and you are not absolving yourself of the bad things society does. You are simply saying, I am not going to in any way contribute to the end of that. I am not going to make a decision, an adult decision, because you don't get the vote until you're 18. I'm not going to make an adult decision on this. I'm going to sit on the sidelines and decide I'm just going to critique it. And I'm not going to critique it in a way that actually has any implications. I mean, the whole point of voting for Jill Stein, as espoused by those who suggested we do it, was to teach Democrats a lesson. And presumably, the way this worked is we vote for Jill Stein, we deny the Democrat of our vote, the Democrat loses, then they learn their lesson. Well, all those people who said that before the vote then denied that it was their fault that the Democrat lost, making it impossible for their whole plan to succeed. Never mind the fact that there is no team Democrats who sit and go like, oh, we had trouble getting those votes that time. No, that's not the way it works either. But even if there was, they then turned around and said it wasn't our fault. In other words, we have no agency whatsoever. It's the dumbest thing in the world. And no one can convince, I mean, people can go out and work for Bernie, go out and work for any candidate. But I think that less people would vote for Jill Stein if Bernie was the candidate. I don't know if you would lose. Maybe some people will vote for Bloomberg if he runs. Who knows in that instance?
We don't want those people.
Well, you will if the election comes down to it. I mean, look, this is addition. This is not the personality of people voting. It is numbers. It is sheer numbers. And to contemplate the the personality of those numbers is also silly. So I mean that's basically it.
Sure. But I'm also thinking about how do we build a new working class coalition? And it's going to involve shrinking the tent in one direction. It has to.
That's all well and good, but I wouldn't reject a vote.
No, I wouldn't
for
reject
Bernie.
the vote. Sure. If people with money want to vote for Bernie, they should absolutely do that. And in fact, like all the dumb left who voted for Jill Stein, they're not going to listen to any of the very rational arguments you just made, which is why I think
I'm not making. But that's. Let me restate this. I'm not talking to the people who vote for Jill Stein. I'm talking to the people who tell people to vote for Jill Stein, and I'm not even talking to them. I'm talking about them, so that what I can do is discredit those arguments and discredit those people. And that's what I'm doing.
Fair enough. I just think some of the liberals who are so quick to blame everything on the people who voted for Jill Stein, I don't know if they're going to be willing to support Bernie Sanders this time around, which is the thing that would need to happen to convince some of those dum-dums to come along.
I think my take, if we were going to psychoanalyze third-party voters right now, is I think Tulsi fans are basically where the Jill Stein people were last time. And I think every single one of those Tulsi supporters would still vote for the ticket if Tulsi was Biden's vice president. So I don't know. Like, I feel like the only thing you can do...
I don't even want to think about.
I mean, that's what she's setting herself up for. And I mean, I don't know. Like, yeah, we've said it all before.
A Square. Sam, I do remember when Milo was about to be born and how nervous you sounded. You did really good, and also, by example, pushing this boulder up every day. Another last week horribles. Brenda, have not heard your calls in a long time. Hope you're well. Stefed, Caleb Kane says that lefties should try and get in the right-wing algorithm by engaging with them in the media. However, lefties seem hesitant to legitimize right-wing outlets by appearing on them. How can lefties infiltrate right-wing algorithms without legitimizing deplorable programming? Well, first of all, I have no problem going on just about any show. Now, as you know, I did not go, and I never really actually said I wouldn't go on Gavin's program. I would have if the person that they had initially told me would show up would. Now, I don't want to be a jerk about this. I know people want me to spill the tea, and the tea will be spilled. I assure you, the tea will be spilled. But you need to, what do they call it when you dunk the tea in there? What is it when you call it?
Brew?
Dip in the tea bag.
No, but there's some other tea.
Oh.
You need to,
I'm not a tea guy.
Not brew. There's another.
Steep?
Steep. You need to steep the tea before it's tea, and then you can't. So I want this tea to be fully steeped. But I would go on Gavin's show under these conditions. Got to be live, or I got to be able to tape record the whole thing. And B, he's not the moderator. I go on to talk to him. He doesn't get to be the official in this situation. No. That's why I wouldn't go on that show. If it was just Gavin and I, in any context, you don't have to pay me $5,000.
Mano a mano.
Or $250. Only $250 is the cost that it takes me to go on that show to say he is the neutral party. That's why I need $250 for that. But I will not get invited onto those shows. If I do, like I went on Peter Schiff's show on the radio. Who else's show? I don't know. Whenever I get an invite, I go.
Jesse Lee Peterson?
Jesse Lee Peterson. I didn't even know who that dude was.
I think there's plenty of people out there who'd pay good money to see you teabag Gavin McInnes.
I think you got my metaphor confused. But I'm also, it would depend on how much money we're talking about. Elise's, is it convenient you don't have an interview on the Epstein story today? First Seth Rich, now Epstein, huh? Attorney Andrew. Sam, on the trade-off of allowing private insurers to offer duplicative insurance to Medicare. First, they don't do that now with existing Medicare, save Medicare Advantage. In fact, I wish Bernie would invoke existing Medicare more on this front. He should be saying the millions of Americans that currently move to Medicare every year don't pine for private insurance option to duplicate the exact thing they get under Medicare. Second, why would you want to keep alive a constituency that has an incentive to lobby to make Medicare worse? As long as private insurers exist, they will try and undermine the publicly funded provider that encroaches on their rents. Well, my point is that it would be the opposite dynamic, that you don't necessarily, you could say like offer these duplicative services. And I just don't think, like you say, there would be a market for it. And to the extent that there was, I think it would be extremely, extremely narrow. And there wouldn't be the type of money that you're talking about. I mean, the idea of like a Medicare for all at that point versus these sort of very narrowly tailored private health insurance for super wealthy people. Because I'm just talking about how you get Medicare for all in the first place. But I don't have any desire to maintain private health insurance. I'm just thinking about like what's a decent like plan to get Medicare for all? What's a decent trade-off to get Medicare for all passed? And then like I just don't know, what kind of business you would get. If you're a private insurance, you're just paying for billions.
I asked Twitter what specific things people could think of that would be covered in certain like Cadillac type plans, they call them, that aren't covered in single payer. And it seems like it's like chiropractic and like basically like alternative types of medicine.
Well, I have a Cadillac plan and it's not that great even. Like I have the best healthcare of probably anyone through Sean's Union. And it was really annoying to find a therapist that took our health insurance. And I still have a bunch of bills from the cancer scare that I had last year. So even the really good Cadillac plans are not all that.
Well, I would imagine what it would be to make sure they're just excluded from the riffraff. When they go see the doctor, that the doctor is only seeing super millionaires, because that way you don't have to wait in line behind, the 100,000aires and then the riffraff. I would imagine it would be, well, we're in special wards at the hospital. Like I'm paid for the luxury, rooms up there. I mean, if that is the price that you have to pay to get it, that's all I'm saying is that, this whole outlawing private insurance stuff, it's just a much bigger cudgel than I think it is problem in practice in political cudgel.
Well, isn't the point that it'll just shrivel up and wither away because nobody's using it?
Well, I think that's what would happen, that you don't necessarily need to outlaw it.
That's a bet, yeah.
That's my bet anyways, but maybe I'm wrong.
I know Michael's not here, but there's this Lula clip that I always reference because he talks about this, it's sort of the zero-sumness, I guess, debate. But he talks about how the problem with the elites had with Lula and Dilma was that they made airports look like train stations, basically by leveling up. And I think like when you talk about people wanting different healthcare based to keep them away from the riffraff, like this is that dynamic, basically. It's not. We'll just play like a few seconds of it.
Mas que os pobres cresceram percentualmente mais. Foi a única vez e começou a incomodar. Você deve ter ouvido no aeroporto do Galeão, no aeroporto de Congonhas, o aeroporto parece uma rodoviária. Tá cheio de pobre aqui andando, gente que não sabia nem frequentar aeroporto.
Yeah.
That's global.
Yep. The DX Fool. So you can read IMs once a week. Don't be that way. Hello, proletariats. I hope authorities will investigate the death of Jeffrey Epstein as thoroughly as they did the death of Layleen Polanco of the House of Extravaganza, the Dominican woman who allegedly died from an epileptic seizure on Rikers Island. Incidentally, according to Splinter News, the Dayton shooter didn't kill his sister. He actually killed his brother, who was a closeted trans man. Only that man's companion, who's still in the hospital, knows what transpired before the two got shot by the shooter. Yes, I did read that, and I wasn't sure. He wasn't out, apparently, as trans, but we don't know to whom. I mean, obviously, he was out to someone, to some people, but not to, supposedly not to his family, but we don't know. There's a lot more to be learning from that, I think. Cosmic Yawn. Hey, Sam, did you see the stories of Bernie's polling drop in Iowa? Is this more mainstream cherry picking, or is there something to it? I have not seen those stories. Cuck Schumer. Matt, could you make Sam saying sucking it to Effie? What? Dexter Washington. Shout out from Australia. Got to say, stay up to 5 a.m., but worth it. Love you guys. Keep it up. Australia has Medicare for all in private. We get no waiting list for elective surgery like knee reconstruction in private rooms. It's not used by young people. It's not making money. The CEOs are calling for going to the U.S. current private system. Dr. Chaos, MD. My ability to watch live and comment has been diminished recently because in addition to my day-to-day workload, I now sit on the board of a small orthotics manufacturing company I work for. I get to help craft policy that determines the direction the company goes, with my focus being on improving the lives of our workers. In fact, we're currently working on a potential profit share for everyone. I want to thank you all for what you're doing and contributing to my leftist outlook and providing me with data, reporting, and analysis that helps me drive policy to make sure our company makes sound financial and moral decisions. Left is best. Oh, that's great. Thank you. Bob Carmody. Why doesn't any reporter ask Trump where after the billions from tariffs going? Not sure I understand that question. Oh, folks, I have a correction to make. And we should have done this up front. Last week, we talked about these raids at Coke Food. And I mistakenly attributed those Cokes to the Koch brothers. It is not the Koch brothers. It's a different family, Koch family, who are horrible when it comes to things like immigration. And apparently they had some problems with race in the past.
You don't say.
I know how shocking that must be.
That's a good hiding spot, though. You'd be the second worst Koch family in America.
Yeah, they could be the worst, but who knows? It's a high bar. So you remember Ken Cuccinelli. He was of the, the vaginal probe regime in Virginia. He is now the acting USCIS, which is the chief immigration, executive, Citizenship and Immigration Services, acting head. And he announced today new Trump administration policies to limit legal immigration, right? And it is obviously cruel and inhumane, but it's also to specifically limit immigration and terrorize families. Now, when you talk about immigrants who are using U.S. services that are available to citizens, understand that I don't know what percentage it is. 100%, 90%, 80%, no less than that, of these people have family, close family, that they're more often than not living with. And so there's opportunities. There's no evidence that people stay on these programs forever, multi-generational. And to the extent that any of them does, it's insignificant numbers in terms of what we spend. I mean, we spend an insignificant number on these programs anyways. Far more for, I don't know, one fifth of the bases that we have around the world. 1/6, 1/10 of the bases, maybe. But here's Ken Cuccinelli. This is, understand what the politics of this are. This is something that Stephen Miller's been pushing for a long time. They certainly believe if we can prove our muster in terms of causing pain for immigration, we're going to benefit with our base. But also, we're going to create a wedge issue We're going to make Democrats, because we know we have a very helpful press in this way, start asking questions. Why should someone who's not a citizen, and they won't phrase it this nicely, who just has like a child here or a parent here or a spouse here, why should they be eligible for Medicaid health insurance? Or why should they be available? Why should they be eligible for, $75 a month in food stamps?
Since 1996, the law has required foreign nationals to rely on their own capabilities and the resources of their families, sponsors, and private organizations in their communities to succeed. However, Congress has never defined the term public charge in the law.
Pause it. Now understand what he's talking about here. In 1996, the law was changed to say that if you're an immigrant coming in, your ability to become a citizen, get a green card, working visa, whatever it is a function of the likelihood of you becoming a public charge. Public charge is basically a way of saying like, not quite a ward of the state, but like supported by the state. And the way that was assessed and what that means. Yes. Is there someone at the door? Open the door. The way that is assessed and what that means is up to interpretation. And the Trump administration has decided to interpret it in such a way that is highly narrowly tailored, or I should say, or broadly tailored as to what constitutes you being a public charge, so as to limit the number of people who are allowed to enter this country legally and stay in this country legally.
Public charge in the law, and that term hadn't been clearly defined by regulation. Well, that is what changes today with this rule. Through the public charge rule, President Trump's administration is reinforcing the ideals of self-sufficiency and personal responsibility, ensuring that immigrants are able to support themselves and become successful here in America. Our rule generally prevents aliens who are likely to become a public charge from coming to the United States or remaining here and getting a green card. Public charge is now defined in a way that ensures the law is meaningfully enforced and that those who are subject to it are self-sufficient.
So there it is. Ken Cuccinelli making it sound, it sounds reasonable. He wasn't going like, we really don't want many brown people in here. We don't want people who are, so-called low skilled. We don't want people who speak Spanish. We don't want people who have been driven from their farms because of violence, or they've been driven from their cities because of violence. We don't want those people here. And he can't say that. So basically what he says is we are changing the regulations so that they are more stringent, and we're going to mold them in such a way. Like, this is an exaggeration, but more or less what they're saying is like, if you come from a city, let's say, that has a one of the top 10 museums of modern art in the world, then you're in. Then you get a green card. That's basically, that's the way that they're going to determine these things. Here is a reporter asking Cuccinelli if you want to take the huddled masses language off the Statue of Liberty, because of course that was the whole point. And we have another headphone over here if you want. But that was the whole point, right? The whole point was, are you going to take the huddled masses? Because bringing in people who have graduate degrees in engineering does not, they don't tend to huddle together in masses.
This will be it for two questions, and we're going to go to one. But I said yes to you. Go ahead.
The second question has to do with the fact that as long as the public charge rule has been in effect since the late 1800s, there have also been, almost as long, the words at the base of the Statue of Liberty that read, "Give us your tired, your poor." You are implementing a public charge rule for the first time. Is that sentiment, "Give us your tired, your poor," still operative? in the United States, or should those words come down? Should the plaque come down off the Statue of Liberty?
Well, I'm certainly not prepared to take anything down off the Statue of Liberty. We have a long history of being one of the most welcoming nations in the world on a lot of bases, whether you be an asylee, whether you be coming here to join your family, or immigrating yourself. This rule will cover, for USCIS, almost 400,000 people a year whose applications to become legal permanent residents will include a meaningful analysis of whether they're likely to become a public charge or not. I do not think by any means we're ready to take anything off the Statue of Liberty. Yes, ma'am.
In other words, we have no problem pretending that we're still taking your tired, your poor, your huddled masses. But the fact of the matter is we're not going to. If you are one of those things, that will count against your application. In fact, that is probably where the threshold will be.
Give us your huddled masses that are huddled around enough money to get by without becoming a nuisance.
But it's also, to be clear, there was already, you had to exhibit a likelihood that you would be able to take care of yourself, or that someone was going to step forward and take care of you. But this is just raising the bar. And of course, at the end of the day, it's going to be subjective. And it's basically, it's not unlike when the DOD had prison guards in Iraq and just said, shackles off. That's what we're looking at ICE, and now we're looking at those officials who will determine your eligibility for a green card.
Well, this is one of the fundamental contradictions, I think, between the desire for a kind of a generous welfare state, which obviously these Republicans don't have, but there are right-wing parties in Europe that really are sincerely committed to it, and the idea of a hard border that is militarized and securitized and guarded, right? And even Bernie Sanders has kind of continued some of this language saying, oh, we want a generous welfare state here, but we have to have borders. We have to enforce the borders because there's a lot of poverty in this world and everyone would come here and take advantage of it, which is one reason why socialists are calling for a softening of borders in combination with a welfare state.
I'm not sure I follow that.
If you're going to do a welfare state within the bounds of this nation state, right? If you're going to have a generous one, you bump up against problems because people in other countries, a lot of countries which have been exploited by the U.S. or messed with via our foreign policy, are going to come here and they're going to want to be a part of it and they're going to want to take advantage of it. And I think that that's a good thing, right? It should be open to everyone. But as soon as you have the idea of you need to protect the economic security of the country or whatever, keep people from coming in, don't you see how that could lead to this kind of state violence?
I don't. What percentage do you think of people who are coming at the border are coming because they want food stamps or because they want Medicaid?
They want security in general. They want to be able to live and survive.
Right, but that's different from a welfare state. That's different from being a generous welfare state. I mean, you're talking about people who are coming from some of the most violent places in the world. I mean, what percentage do you think are coming here? I mean, if you think it's a contradiction to be able to offer this stuff because it's going to attract more people, I mean, what percentage of those people do you think are coming here for that?
I don't know. Probably some. They see that America, to some degree, provides for citizens, although less and less so.
I mean, I would think it's pretty low. I would think it's pretty low. I think
I would like to see. Actually, I would like to see more statistics on it because I don't actually know.
Yeah, I mean, I think because I think that's a right wing frame.
But this is a logic that people on the left have also parroted.
Which logic?
There's a lot of poverty in this world. If we don't have strong borders, everyone's going to come here. That was a bad answer that Bernie gave on the question of borders, I think.
Yeah, I didn't hear that, but I do think that's a bad answer. But I just don't think that the number of people who are coming to this country for that is particularly high. I mean, I think it's I think people come here for economic opportunity. I don't think anybody's coming here going like, we're going to get what, $150
I don't think
bucks.
I don't think the
food
caravan
stamps?
would have been twice as big if we had Medicare for all.
Well,
for
whether or
instance.
not they're coming here for that, it is certainly a part of the rhetoric that's being spread by both the left and the right now. And I'm pointing out some problems with that.
But what part of that rhetoric? You said it's a contradiction to offer an extended welfare state and also to have decriminalized borders.
No, I think those two things actually go together. Like, it's you know what? We can talk more about this later.
Okay, I just wasn't sure what. I just don't think that the number of people who are coming here for these benefits is particularly high. I think people who end up on these programs when they come here, it's because their plans have not worked out because of the exact same reason why, or very similar reasons why other people end up on these plans. They've had some type of misfortune. They got unlucky. They didn't find a job. Someone had a healthcare problem.
The contradiction comes way down the line. I agree with that.
All right, let's go to here is now Ken Cuccinelli saying that basically the terrorism that we saw from ICE this week following the shooting in El Paso, they decided to bring their own more official, fully jacked, armed guys to a series of factories in Missouri. And here is his promise that, this is just the beginning, folks. And you know it is, right? They're going to, right now, they're sitting down and they're saying, we're going to do one of these a month till the election. Maybe we'll ramp it up in the months before the election. Here it is.
There were recently workplace immigration raids, and of course, President Trump, his first prison commutation went to a man who was arrested after his business failed when about 400 illegal immigrants were arrested. Did that decision to grant a prison commutation to this man send the wrong message to employers?
I'm not really prepared to speak to that. I don't think so. The president does those one person at a time. I think what you saw ICE do this week in enforcing the law meaningfully with 7 operations across the state of Mississippi, and of course investigations still ongoing, criminal investigations growing out of that, is a growth for ICE from the previous year. Their enforcement efforts are up, and I think you can expect to see more of that as part of the message of this administration. We're going to enforce the law.
So what that reporter was talking about was that Trump had commuted the decision. This was back in 2017, the end of 2017. There was a guy who, Rubishin, who had served 8 years of a 27-year sentence for bank fraud and money laundering. During a raid of his agri-processors plant, ICE officials arrested 400 undocumented Mexican and Guatemalan immigrants that he had a slaughterhouse, basically. He was never tried on the immigration charges because he didn't want to let his employees to testify about their treatment at the plant. He got acquitted of 67 misdemeanor child labor laws. But Trump let him commuted this guy, even though he had hired 400 people who were supposedly illegal. Meanwhile, they'll go and arrest these people and separate them from their families. The hypocrisy thing just doesn't work. Right?
What is it about like meat packing that's just always super abusive?
Watch Frederick Wiseman's Meat.
Yeah.
Just to get a little hint. These meat packing facilities, working there is extremely hard for people.
I thought Upton Sinclair got to that.
Yeah, they at least used to have strong unions, but those have largely been broken now.
It's an extreme. I can't remember who had written about this, but the work in these plants are disturbing, super disturbing. Let's go to the phones. Calling from a 972 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
This is Chris from Texas.
Chris, what's on your mind?
So I I kind of saw. Let me start over. I saw your tweet, quote tweeting Steven Crowder, insinuating that you had some sort of dirt on him.
Whoa. How did that tweet start?
I'm not sure.
Hold on for a second. Let me see if I can pull that up.
It was a.
I think the quote.
Yes.
I think the quote was started. I mean, my tweet started with "for Crowder's eyes only." Yes, I have it right here. Can you pull that up?
Okay.
It says very clearly, "for Crowder's eyes only." I'm sorry. Did you read that?
How could you be so sure that I'm not Steven Crowder?
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough.
You wouldn't call for
Okay, but anyway.
Did I spell your name correctly? That's how I do the test. Your first name. Did I spell it correctly?
I'm sorry, what was that?
Did I spell your first name correctly on the tweet?
Sure.
No, I did not. I spelled it incorrectly. But go ahead. What's going on?
Okay. So, I have an anecdote about my experience with Steven Crowder.
Okay.
And not that I think that it in any way like completes kind of the puzzle, but I think that it has a lot of little nuggets in it.
Let's do tell. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
what's your name again?
I'm sorry?
What's your name again?
Chris.
Chris. Okay, go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, so I'm a student at the University of North Texas, and this year, on a Friday morning, I just kind of woke up. I was still a little high from the night before,
excited.
And I open up my phone. I'm sorry?
Excited, you mean, right?
Yeah, I was elated.
Okay,
great. To be awake, and I didn't have any class that day. So I slept in a little bit. And so the first thing that I see when I get up is everyone's tweeting about, oh my God, Steven Crowder's on campus. And no one had any prior knowledge of this. He just, the way that he sets up his Change My Mind segments, I guess that he just kind of doesn't really allow it to be known until like he's there and he's got everything set up. And so I'm kind of interested, and so I decide to go down there and see what's going on. And so I'm there with two of my friends, and one of my friends, we're standing kind of right behind him because we kind of pushed our way to the front. He's set up in front of our library, in front of a little fountain, and the fountain's not running. And so we're actually standing in the fountain. So we're kind of like right in the foreground kind of his, or in the background. And so, and then my friend points out to me, she's like, I see the producer who is letting these people come on to do this segment. And she points him out to me because she knows that I want to go talk to him. And so I kind of, when I get the opportunity, I kind of wave at the producer. And I didn't mention the specific Change My Mind that he was doing. The specific segment that he was doing was about abortion, which isn't the issue that I'm the most well-read on or the well-spoken on, but, you know, I figured that it was my only opportunity to kind of get in and talk to him.
Okay, fair enough.
And so I go to the producer, and so he's kind of vetting me to see whether he's kind of vetting everyone, you know, to make sure that I don't know, to kind of see who they want on and who they don't want on. And so he's
all right. You got to pick it up. You got to pick it up just a little bit more. Let's.
Okay. Yeah. So he asked my position on abortion, and so I kind of explained it to him, and he just kind of says to me like, "Oh yeah, your view sounds really nuanced and it's really interesting, but really we want kind of more people who are like nut jobs, who will." And I'm not pretentious enough to think that what he's saying is like you're too smart to go on Steven Crowder's show, but like they're really like fishing for content. You know what I mean?
Of
like,
course.
They're not actually going to college campuses and trying to like, oh, let's have polite conversation with students and actually see whether we could have like an exchange of ideas. It's literally just like for content's sake.
Yeah, I'm not surprised, to be honest with you. I mean, I'm not surprised by this, of course. Yeah, he doesn't care about doing anything real. Of course not. The dude is a charlatan. And I know for a fact that when he has the opportunity to have an actual debate with someone not on neutral turf, that he, in fact, not just neutral turf, on turf that by all accounts could be considered not necessarily home turf, but friendly turf. And I will be more specific with that because you do not roll these things out until September, right? I mean, that is the oldest. Everybody knows this from a marketing standpoint. So I would just tell you, stay tuned because, like I say, the tea has to steep before you can spill it. Appreciate the call.
But why would you steep tea before if you're going to steep tea, why wouldn't you drink it?
I'm going to sip a little bit of it, and then I'm going to pour some of it I'm going to spill some of it. I'm going to do both. Right. I'm steeping a lot of tea, but good question.
Some for you, some for your dead homies.
Now I can see why Crowder didn't want to debate
get in the weeds with that guy.
Yeah, exactly. Totally on top of this stuff. Calling from an 804 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, this is William from Richmond, Virginia.
William from Richmond, Virginia. What's on your mind?
Right. First of all, I'm wondering what kind of tea is the best tea. But being serious.
Right.
On August 3rd in Brazil, the military police entered and monitored a PSLO women's meeting.
A what?
And I think this is...
A what meeting?
This didn't get much coverage. Do you need me to repeat that?
Yeah. Hello?
Oh, PSLO, as in the Brazilian leftist party.
Okay.
Yeah, the Bolsonaro military police monitored the PSLO women's meeting, saying they were monitoring for anything suspicious. And so this is just more of a sign of the descent into clown fascism in Brazil.
Yeah. I mean, things have moved in the past week in a fairly positive way. I mean, fairly measured.
Yeah,
right?
with the Lula story.
Well, the Lula story and
not so much with college campuses.
No, but also the Supreme Court. Was it the Supreme Court that said you can't investigate Greenwald? I mean, there was a couple. Was a couple of. I mean, but yeah, there's a huge problem there. I appreciate the phone call, but yes, these guys are not going to be any less fascist. They're just going to do different things at different times. And sometimes the state apparatus will
Bolsonaro
will stop them, but other times it won't. Calling from 307 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, how's it going, guys? This is Rob from Wyoming.
Rob from Wyoming. What's on your mind?
Oh, not much. You guys brought up everybody's favorite Odie the dog and impersonator and just happy to be here guy, Lincoln Chafee, the other day. And interestingly enough, he's landed out here and declared himself a libertarian. I just thought you might find that funny.
Oh, is that right? I had no idea.
Yeah. I assume the move is, for Enzi's seat since he's retiring. He's probably hoping to run for Mike Enzie's seat.
That would be great because he's running against probably Cheney, right?
No, I think it's going to be Cynthia Lummis.
Really? I thought Lynn Cheney would be running.
I thought so too, but all of the everything around here sounds like Lummis.
Wow. Well, it would be great to get Chafee. That would be a major upgrade.
You don't feel competitive with another libertarian entering the sort of race?
No, he's not running. He's running
not
for
as the
Senate.
president,
No,
but okay.
as a potential candidate for the Libertarian presidential race, I support.
Well, that's kind of the reason for my call.
Yes.
Democrats out here, and we kind of have a growing left. We have other plans. So, and we don't get much press out here, and we have 500,000 people, and we're going to get one Senate seat, which, we can discuss that all we want, but, we need help. So if everybody wouldn't mind checking out Yana for Wyoming, YANA, she's great. Medicare for all, $15 minimum wage. She's a great candidate. And we could really use the help out here.
Do you think that Chafee would split the Republican vote?
He may. He very well may. That's a possibility. Or, you alluded to it earlier. If enough people just stay home, we're 70-30 out here, but if enough people just stay home, we could have a legitimate shot to do something.
Jackson. What is the county? Is it Jackson County in Wyoming?
I don't think it's Jackson County. I can't remember off the top of my head what they're in. It might be Teton County.
No, but I'm talking about Jackson County. I think is the most is wildly blue county. It's the only one out there.
Right. That's Teton County. That's
Teton
where Jackson
County.
is.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't expect anybody to know that. I mean,
my understanding is too that
no
Jackson has the highest wealth disparity in the country.
Yes, sir.
Because people can move there, and the residential requirements in terms of income tax are virtually nil. Like as opposed to Florida, you need to live down there for 6 months and a day to not pay income tax.
Right.
And my understanding is in Wyoming that if you just buy a house there, and maybe you got to go for a couple of weekends or something like that, you can maintain residency and pay no income taxes. So if you're super rich, what you do is you go and you buy a house there. But what it's done with the housing stock there is everything is either like super, super expensive or just someone still lives there.
Right. And I think it's really hard for working class people, of course, too, because apartments are sky high and whatnot. But yeah, I believe that's how Liz Cheney, I think she just rented an apartment there, a condo there, bought one there for a little while, before she ran.
Right.
Because she's never really lived here. I mean, and it was so funny because the whole public discourse was Carpetbagger Liz, and then she gets elected.
Yep. Well,
but anyway, I just want to say that would be great if Chafee split that.
Yeah,
but,
that would be good.
Yana for Wyoming, like I said, we could use all of the help we could get.
All right, folks, check it out. YanaForWyoming.com, right? All right, appreciate the call.
Yana for Wyo.
Hey, thank you so much, Sam. Love you guys.
Thank you. Yana for Wyo.
YWO.
YWO.
Yeah, WYO, sorry.
WYO. Here is Bill Barr. Now, apparently the latest, folks, obviously, there's a lot better places to go if you want to get information on Jeffrey Epstein. And I don't know what happened. It is shocking that the guy was in a position that he could commit suicide. That is, I think, obvious. What I have seen is this. This seems to me to be the most sort of like lays it out here. This is from the Washington Post. Correction officers had not checked in on financier and registered sex offender Jeffrey Epstein for several hours before he was found hanging in his cell Saturday. This is a person familiar with the matter. Now, who knows who these people are? Officers should have been checking Epstein, who was being held in a special housing unit of the Metropolitan Correctional Center in New York City every 30 minutes. And under normal circumstances, he should have had a cellmate. So there was like a perfect storm of things that showed up here. It's really weird. But a person who had been assigned to share a cell with Epstein had transferred on Friday, before the weekend, probably when they're short-staffed. And for reasons that investigators are still exploring, he did not receive a new cellmate. That left Epstein, who had been previously placed on suicide watch. The guy was placed on suicide watch 2.5 weeks ago. What had improved so much in his life from July 25th to August 9th that he's like, we don't need to. He doesn't need a suicide watch anymore. He just seems so much more chipper now. That seems to be a weird question. Why there was no cellmate put in there? Why was that cellmate transferred in the first place? Apparently his suicide was listed as an apparent suicide. They're still waiting for more information from the coroner. I mean, I'm not surprised. If the guy committed suicide, would that surprise anybody? The question is like,
how was that allowed?
How was he allowed?
I don't think he committed suicide.
You don't?
Nope.
I think he did.
A whole generation just got red-pilled about this. Everybody has conspiracy theories, and I agree.
I do not have a conspiracy theory, but it would not surprise me that someone who had tried to commit suicide before would try to commit suicide again. He had every reason to think that he was not going to escape this situation without being in prison for the rest of his life. And I don't think you want to be known as a billionaire child molester in prison's probably not the best situation to be in. The question is, was this just a total coincidence, incompetent? Look, people commit suicide in prison all the time. But the idea that there wasn't a special watch on this seems very odd. The two corrections officers assigned to watch the special unit in the detention center where Epstein was being housed were working overtime, one forced to do so by management, the other for his fourth or fifth consecutive day. This is according to the local union. The correctional center is functioning for less than 70% of needed correctional officers. Epstein's was not on suicide watch Saturday before he was found. But because he was held in the facility's special housing unit, he should have been checked every 30 minutes. And that procedure was not being followed. Cameras are prevalent in the facility, but they generally don't see inmate cells. He was taken off a suicide watch a week later, brought to the special housing unit, where there was supposedly a higher level of security, but not constant monitoring. And union officials said that he and other officials had long been raising concerns as the Trump administration had imposed a hiring freeze and budget cuts on the Federal Bureau of Prisons. In other words, mission accomplished. So I don't know. Here is Bill Barr. He is just outraged that this could happen. Shocked.
Yeah, right.
Shocked.
Before I begin, I'd like to briefly address news from the Manhattan Correctional Center over the weekend regarding Jeffrey Epstein. This sex trafficking case was very important to the Department of Justice and to me personally. It was important to the dedicated prosecutors in the Southern District of New York and to our FBI agents who investigated the case and were preparing it for trial. Most importantly, this case was important to the victims who had the courage to come forward and deserve the opportunity to confront the accused in the courtroom. I was appalled, and indeed the whole department was, and frankly, angry to learn
I don't think so.
of the MCC's failure to adequately secure this prisoner. We are now learning of serious irregularities at this facility that are deeply concerning and demand a thorough investigation. The FBI and the Office of Inspector General are doing just that. We will get to the bottom of what happened, and there will be accountability. But let me assure you that this case will continue on against anyone who was complicit with Epstein.
Yeah, specifically, he's probably talking about, wasn't George Mitchell and Bill Richardson's, like, their names came out? Was it George Mitchell? Will you double check that? I think it was definitely Bill Richardson's. Were named by one of the alleged victims as having been around. I don't know exactly what it was. That came out on papers. I think it was on Friday. And I'm not sure who it was. It was Virginia Giuffre. It's an accusation by a woman who was allegedly trafficked, one of Epstein's victims. And also, I think she mentioned Bill Richardson as well. I mean, I think there's going to be a ton of names thrown around. But the question is, will they really genuinely pursue this going forward? I'm not aware of. There should be an ongoing investigation into who supposedly told Acosta in the first place.
Yeah, I want to know that answer.
I mean, because Acosta came out and said, I was told by higher ups to not pursue him. Right. Or whatever it is that he was told to lay off.
Like, who would have the authority over him like that?
And who would have the authority to say, like, any co-conspirators can walk too? It's all ridiculous.
It really is. And I don't know anything for sure, obviously. We don't, and we probably won't. But he was about to tell on some of the most powerful people in the world. So the fact that it seems like something fishy was going on, whether he was actually killed in jail or whether they just stepped away and let him kill himself, it seems like there's more to it here.
I think there has to be. Well, look, just to have that, like, it seems to me that it's malfeasance not to have, like, let's just assume that the MCC is that dysfunctional, which it could very well be. They don't give a crap. But the idea that there wasn't someone who says, like, hey, this is...
We're going to get our act together for this.
We better get our act together for this. Like, we're going to send a special emissary. We're going to have a federal representative there. You know what? I'm the guy who's going to say overtime for one guard to sit there.
And anything short of that looks an awful lot like an oversight.
Yes. Very convenient oversight.
That's all I'm saying.
Right. I mean, it would be ridiculous not to have questions about this. I don't know what the answer is, but it would be ridiculous not to have questions about this. Very strange. Very, very, very strange. This is good. Jamie, you were involved in some of these protests over the weekend too, right?
I was.
Tell us about what you did this weekend in terms of the ICE stuff.
Okay, so Close the Camps NYC had a nonviolent direct action on Saturday where there was a rally, then there was a march. We marched to the ICE office, which is on the West Side Highway, and a bunch of people who had signed up to get arrested blocked the West Side Highway for a little while until the cops arrested all of them. I did not sign up to be arrested this time around because I was actually meeting my mom afterwards, but I was a marshal, which means you kind of keep the line moving together. You get in between people and the cops. You make sure nobody gets hurt. Oh my God, that's my friend Emmy. Those are some of my friends in there. Really awesome people, all of them. We were chanting "Close the Camps," "Shut down ICE," "No Nations, No Borders," things of that nature. And it was a really good action. Almost 100 people got arrested. There were a few hundred people there, at least 300, which is pretty good considering that the main organizers behind this one, Movimiento Cosecha, is only like 20 people right now.
Wow.
But they really need to get more people involved. So if you see this and you want to help out, you can go to closethecampsnyc.com and get involved.
And then on Sunday, there was a protest at an Amazon store in New York City by some Jewish community groups. The Jews for Racial and Economic Justice, JFREJ, and they went to Amazon to basically protest tech helping people, helping these ICE raids. They did it in D.C. and in New York. There was other Jewish groups that were also involved. Specifically yesterday was Tish B'Av, and Tish B'Av is basically a catch-all holiday where they observe, like Jews observe, like the destruction of the temple back like where are we? 2020 some odd years ago. No, wait, that would have been actually like 30 years later or somewhere around there. The destruction of the temple. And then also subsequent tragedies. Some people fast. We didn't really celebrate Tish B'Av, but and here are some pictures from there, and then this audio too. A lot of people got arrested, and they didn't anticipate it. So here's this is a little fun fact. Sometimes the cops can commandeer an MTA bus.
So there are so many Jews who got arrested at the Amazon flagship store protesting their connection with ICE that the NYPD has brought a bus. They've commandeered a bus to take the arrest. I've never seen that before, ever.
There you go. And I think it's taking them to see Phantom of the Opera.
Yeah, I wonder if Phantom of the Opera people like their advertisement used on a bus that was commandeered to take away
protesters against ICE, of all things, too.
Oh, and I should mention 2 friends of the show were among the arrestees.
Who's that?
On Sunday. Molly Crabapple and Ellie Valley.
Oh, great. Well, I mean, great.
Also, solidarity with Ellie Valley because he got his Twitter account mass reported by a bunch of Nazis. So hopefully he gets that back soon.
Jewish Voice for Peace was also big in the action on Saturday, and I met a lot of those people, and they were really cool.
Hold on for one second. Are you asking me if you want that soda? The what? The Spentru? The seltzer. Yes, you can have the seltzer. It's warm. My daughter is in the studio, and she apparently really needed to parch her thirst. Okay, here it is, everybody. Welcome to my sister Betsy and my daughter Mila, who are in studio guests today. This is great. Dan Bongino, what is he doing these days?
Fox News hits, basically.
Oh, does he do Fox? Does he have his own show, or does he not have his own show?
Oh, I don't think he has his own show, no.
No, not anymore? Ever since the NRA stuff? That's too bad.
Nobody wanted to pick that up, I guess.
That's a real shame. But here he is. They're bringing on... there was a fencer, guy who fences, gold medalist, I guess, in the Pan American Games, who took the knee during the playing of the national anthem. Good for him. And apparently this guy, I guess he was interviewed later, he knelt to protest racism, gun control, and mistreatment of immigrants and President Trump.
There was another guy, too, named, it looks like Gwen Berry, who was a hammer thrower who raised his fist.
Good.
So, yeah.
All right. Well, here's Dan Bongino, who's really offended by this on Fox and Friends.
Yeah. Griff, I saw that story, and I'm really tired of these people, and I think a lot of America is too. We share nothing in common with them. Number one, it's all about their own self-promotion. It's rarely about them engaging in any kind of a positive way to change things for the better. Kneeling is a sign of...
Pause it for 1 second. We have heard Dan Bongino really, really go out there and praise people for positively trying to change things in this country.
Big Reverend Barber fan.
Right, exactly, yeah. I really, I just get to take some time from praising Reverend Barber and, my work in trying to reestablish Acorn, which really represented a lot of underprivileged people, to just say, hey, guy, come on.
Come on, Kaepernick.
Right.
Kneeling is a sign of disrespect to our flag, which many of the patriotic Americans who watch this network know shuts the argument down right away. So whatever you're trying to argue for, what did Kaepernick say? Social justice, and I believe his this kneeler at the Pan American Games, I believe his thing was he was protesting some systemic racism. Those are all horrible things. We should all be trying to combat these things. But you shut the conversation down immediately when you disrespect our
Pause
flag.
it for 1 second. I hope people understand and appreciate the irony of the fact that that's probably the first time I've ever heard a clip of Fox News where someone said, racism is bad. We want social justice, right? Guess what, Dan? It
looks like he successfully started a conversation.
Still going. But let's go back a little bit. I don't even think he realizes, oh my gosh, I'm defeating my own point.
I'm doing what he wants me to do.
Right. Dan Bongino is really a conversation ender. Roll the tape. Let's listen to more Dan Bongino.
This kneeler at the Pan American Games, I believe his thing was he was protesting some systemic racism. Those are all horrible things.
Yeah.
We should all be trying to combat these things. But you shut the conversation down immediately when you disrespect our flag. People have come home in boxes for this, to support this. And it reminds me, again, one more thing here, that we share almost nothing in common anymore with liberals. This was once a common space sports where Americans could go for a refuge from the back and forth and the friction of politics. And liberals have to destroy, because they're a forest fire, every single thing they touch. And they've now destroyed this too. By the way, the guy was representing the United States. Get up and put your hand over your heart and then give a speech later about how you want to protest racism. That's great. We'll all be with you for that. But you don't do it this way.
Wow. First off, I don't know if this is the first time that Fox has ever even acknowledged that systemic racism exists. And Dan Bongino is saying that he's going to be giving speech. Is that right? Is Dan Bongino... how many episodes do you think of his NRA TV covered systemic racism in this country?
I will bet 0.
He's going to start now, right now.
Remember the conversation we had with Tom Skoka about ventriloquism on Friday? This part, I think, rings back to
Back to our flag, which many of the patriotic Americans who watch this network know, shuts the argument down right away.
Right, yeah, there you go. Yeah.
And the fact that the flag sends people home in boxes maybe isn't a great argument for it.
Well, that was also weird. I think he was saying that they have the right to go and participate in sports, and that's why guys get sent home in boxes. Which,
it's like they go and sacrifice themselves for free speech, apparently, and this is how you're using your speech to kneel during the national anthem. It shuts down the conversation, Sam.
It shuts down the conversation to exercise the rights of free speech, or I don't know if he's saying did the other teams that were there, did they all have to send home people in boxes too to go play? If it's really Pan American Games, did they all need to you don't get into those games unless you've sent a certain number of people into war and they've died.
The truth is, it was just a spasm of sort of patriotism, whatever it means in Dan Bongino's head. So let's just mention soldiers coming home in boxes,
right?
And then we win the argument.
That's what
we're the
patriotism.
Patriots. Yeah.
Right. You know what they're pissed about? That mentioning people coming home in boxes does not shut down the conversation anymore. That's what they're mad about.
Exactly. It's still so weird to hear them say, lead with that when they're talking about why we should uphold this country.
Right. They're just pissed because it doesn't work, because it doesn't make any sense. Here's an idea. Let's see if we don't send home our men and women in the military, if we don't send them home in boxes, if we still get to go play in the Pan American Games. We could test that premise right there. Let's go to the phones. Calling from an 847 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from? Oh, we don't have much time.
Hey, it's Josh from Chicago.
Josh from Chicago. How are you, Josh?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing good.
I just found out that opening day at Fenway Park, White Sox versus Red Sox.
In 2020.
Yeah.
Well, there you go.
Looking forward to seeing the White Sox beat the Red Sox again in person. Anyways, I want to talk about single-payer healthcare.
Yes, that's what we discussed on the show today.
And I always discuss and my experiences and also my experiences paying for, I guess, senior care here.
Yep.
So, I mean, I've sort of talked about this with you before, but my dad is we had to put him in an assisted living facility last year. And the cost of it is around $1,800 a month, which is pretty astronomical. And that's not even taking into account, like, having to get an aide to take care of him, having to get medications, having to get him to his doctor, all that stuff. And Medicare really isn't going to cover a lot of that stuff.
Right.
And so I think for me, the two things that need to go into, especially a single-payer system, the one thing that, and I'm glad to see Bernie talking about both these things, is senior care. I know my ex-girlfriend, when I lived in England, she was a aide in the NHS. So she actually went and helped look after. She would go and stay the night with seniors in their homes when if they were disabled or had things like or had dementia or something like that. And that's free in England, although it's getting pinched by the Conservatives right now. But it is free and it is covered in the NHS. And I also think the thing that I really like what Bernie's actually started to focus on, especially given the tragedies we've had with all these mass shootings, is there was a video that he put up recently with a woman talking about having PTSD and not being able to see a therapist. I know Jamie talked about this as well. Most therapists I've tried to get in to see are out of network, which means it'll cost you anywhere between $75 or $100 a session. And I think what Bernie's doing and talking about the fact that mental health has to be covered under a single-payer system, to me is really valuable. And again, the NHS is being pinched right now with mental health care. It's becoming increasingly harder over there to see a therapist under the NHS system, and they're starting to means test it a little bit. But for me, those are the two biggest things: senior care and mental health care. I know you talked about senior care, obviously.
Yeah.
But it's just not affordable anymore to be able to see a therapist, and especially when you have these not only mass shootings, but you also have people just dealing with their everyday lives and things going on. I appreciate Bernie's talking about this, but I think these are two things that absolutely need to be covered in a single-payer system.
Agreed. Appreciate the call, Josh. Let's take one more phone call, then we'll take some IMs and get out of here. Calling from a 347 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, this is Jonah calling from San Francisco.
Jonah from San Francisco. What's on your mind?
Yeah, I watched a video the other day from Michael. He was talking about Sam Harris's kind of reaction to the mass shootings and kind of what a joke he is. But, I was thinking about how everyone is sort of like doing the whole debate Sam. But I think you guys should expand that to the whole IDW crowd, because in my opinion, they all seem like cowards, and none of them kind of want to mess with you or Michael. So this, whole debate Sam Seder, you coward. I think you should expand that to the whole IDW, put some pressure on them, and see if any of them will step up to the plate.
Yeah, I mean, I've certainly, August, I think we all take a little bit of a vacation from that maybe. But yeah, I think that there's going to be more of that. I mean, the idea really, again, is to just make it, and we're going to play this interview with Caleb Kane during our vacation that I did actually about a month ago now, where he basically said the way that he sort of was prevented from spiraling further into his into sort of the alt-right universe online was when lefties got into the algorithm and by debating them. And to the extent that we can't get into the algorithm by debating them, we can get algorithm adjacent by presenting as if we were debating them.
Flaming them.
Exactly. And that's basically it. That's a little bit painting with a broad brush, but that's largely the strategy, is to basically say, we're not going to allow you to have unfettered pipeline to deliver your toxic stuff to the American Ute, as it were. And you're right. I appreciate the call. I mean, if they're not going to engage, happily have the engagement. But we're too rude, or we're too not nice, or
we say things that shut down conversations.
We shut down
that's
conversations
racist.
like that's racist.
We should have a cage match with all of them.
I would love to see. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I any of them.
They don't want that.
Seems like their conversation still continues, though.
Oh, their conversations?
Well, I'm just
the
saying,
ones
like,
they've had with the same 8 people over and over again?
Yeah, exactly. Like, I don't think that shuts it down that much. All right, folks, that's it for phone calls. We have run out of time. Apologies. A lot of people holding on for over an hour. I apologize for that. We took the ones in the front there. All right, let's take some IMs, then we'll get out of here. Retcon, did you see Michael's debate with Destiny? What were your favorite parts? Just kidding. Michael told us to say that to you. I did not see it. No. Scott from Evanston. Hi, MR Crew. Ainsley's Friend Chicken Salad Sandwich Store provides limitless creative opportunities to expand their product line. It reminds me of an SLL skit in the 70s about a Scotch tape store located in an indoor mega mall. Indeed. Empire Burlesque. I've been to the government-run DMV and the government-run post office, both of which at their worst were far, far more pleasant than dealing with a cable company, a bank, or a phone company. Indeed. Putin on the fritz. Not listening live, but I hope you guys covered the southern Yemeni separatists who turned their backs on the Saudi coalition, seized the city of Aden over the weekend. No, I didn't even see anything about that at all. Goes to show how big of a disaster this war is for Riyadh. No side turns their back on a coalition with imminent victory. Saudis have spent half a decade and billions of dollars committing mass atrocities and genocide. Can't even win the confidence of factions inside the country that they even have the ability to win this conflict. That's fascinating. Annoying pendant. Morning quickie is misspelled today. Uh-oh. You send a message to the proper authorities. Frankie B. Hey, Sam, I had a horrible dream last night where Donald Trump won California and ultimately the 2020 election. It woke me up and made me realize that we're actually living in a nightmare. I'm now motivated more than ever to make sure that I get as many people to register to vote as possible. Good. That's getting as many people registered to vote is something that's going to be good for well beyond Donald Trump. Local pizza historian, cancer survivor checking in. I wish the federal government would take away my health care. I'm still via installments paying off my cancer. In their defense, I got about $750,000 worth of bucks of care for a low price of just $8,000. Can you imagine if I didn't have the insurance, if I didn't have a solid job, a wife with a second income, I'd be dead. It's actually easy to imagine. Sorry. I'm glad, hopefully you're doing better.
Paying off my cancer care is
yeah.
God.
Chupacabra. Should we start calling white supremacists neo-Nazis? I think the term white supremacist doesn't communicate to the general public how dangerous their ideology is, but the term neo-Nazi will catch everyone's attention. Maybe. I don't know. Communist Dolphin. Why do you always talk about the difference between Warren and Sanders as a negative for her? I don't,
wouldn't say you're guilty of that.
I don't think I'm guilty of that. She's pro getting rid of the filibuster. He's not. Indeed. She was ahead of the entire field on impeachment. Sanders wasn't. Indeed. She's got plans of universal pre-K, gun control, etc. that he doesn't. I'm not saying all the differences are positive for her. They also aren't negative. Bernie is plenty bad on foreign policy to see his drone stance. I mean,
I don't think Warren's drone stance is terribly good either.
no, I think Warren on foreign policy is I think, definitely not better than Bernie's. But all those other things you say is right. I certainly don't feel like I'm guilty of that.
Yeah, I think her like pharma nationalization thing is, I think, something.
The
Bernie doesn't
generic
offer
drugs,
either. Yeah.
as far as I know, he doesn't have one. Where she would produce, not nationalize, produce.
Right.
Pope of the Jews. Hey, Sam, great interview today. Sadly, it hit a little too close to home. My mother-in-law, who is 98, is going through hell right now, fighting her assisted living facility as they keep trying to raise the rent, and Medicaid will not cover any increases. In addition, they want to place her in a nursing home because she sometimes needs a walker, which they are not insured for. Every nursing home within 25 miles of her family still in New York says her assets are too high. Those assets, or whatever, is left from my father-in-law selling their lifelong house to pay the medical bills up until that point. They were hoping they could use whatever money was left to send the grandkids to college. Sorry about that. That's horrible. Final IM of the day. Book recommendation for Master Matt, Beautiful Democracy, 2007 by Russ Castronovo, a historical study of academic aesthetic theory and curriculum in America during the late 19th and 20th century.
Ooh.
The police function of urban beautification, global imperialism as attempted realization of the Kantinian universal, the shaping of popular civic identity, etc., filtered through American literature, strikes, race, aesthetics, 101, lesson plans, fascist ideology, amazing read, assigned in my politics and aesthetics program at Evergreen State. You're welcome, Leck.
Hell yeah, Evergreen.
Peace and love to the crew. See you tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the light bar, but finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in.